Hey guys, what's up? Welcome to Danion's Gaming Hub. My name is of course Danion and welcome to a guide for the new Demon Hunter 715 stats and priorities that we are going to take a look at. We're going to take a look at the talents that you're going to be using. We're going to discuss about said talents and we're going to take a look at the stats because they quite drastically changed with 715. Right, so what happened with 715? I'm going to go very brief over this because I want to make this guide so that you can, increase your DPS because Demon Hunters right now are one of the top DPSs out there. And I'm talking about really top. Your burst damage, if you're going to use these talents, are absolutely ridiculous. What I will not be talking about are legendaries, because legendaries are so diverse, especially now that we got like 3-4 new ones out there. It's just going to be too much to talk about. If I do gonna get one of the legendaries, I will be talking about it. Okay, my bird just flew away. The fuck? Okay, well. That's the thing that happened. Maybe I don't even know if you heard him, but he was like, So far for the quick guide. So what I will not be talking about are the legendaries, because they are just too diverse out there. What I do have to mention is that my burst DPS can be affected by my legendary called Sinidaria the Symbiote. If you don't know what this does, it's right on the screen right there. Your attacks cause an additional 30% damage to enemies above 90% health, and you heal for 100% of the damage done. This legendary got revamped. It's pretty powerful right now, and for burst damage is actually insane, especially with the combination that we are going to be using. So if you want to go for absolute burst, this is actually one of the better legendaries for Demon Hunters right now. Alright, so stat priority. Stat priority is right on the screen right now. Write this down, take a screenshot, memorize it, put it on your wall. These are the most important stats for us as a Demon Hunter Havoc right now. First is crit. Then it's mastery. Then it's followed by agility. Blizzard wanted to fix it, apparently it's not fixed. Then followed by haste, and then followed by versatility. Versatility used to be our... It was kind of on par with mastery, but very soon people already started figuring out that mastery actually was scaling better. However, we had abilities that were not chaos damage, and our versatility in this case would be better because versatility is a flat out damage and mastery is simply chaos damage, and we had a little bit less of abilities with that. We still have, with mastery scale so much better right now, it's no longer worth it to take versatility for those two abilities that we simply use when it's on cooldown. It does a lot of damage and we will be going over that, but it's not going to be mandatory anymore because our mastery literally outscales absolutely everything. The reason why that is because the diminishing returns on versatility are way harder than diminishing returns on mastery. So what that means is you're going to need a more amount of percentage of versatility in order to actually acquire said percentage. So for example, if I want to have 10% versatility, I'm going to be needing around 11 to 12, maybe even 13% versatility in order to acquire that 13 or that 10%. As to with mastery, I just took on my gear that is pretty bad in this, just to show you your point. Mastery is now on 44.80%, which basically means that it is a 44% damage increase because it's calculated down. The diminishing returns start very high at the top, meaning that you can literally have a ramp up of your chaos damage by almost 45% without diminishing returns. Now combine it with your crit. Let me put on my normal gear here, which is this one. Item level 887. I actually have way better gear, as you can see here, but the itemization in this patch is so more valuable that in order to get the best stats, because crit and mastery work so well. As you can see here, I'm actually using an 865 boot instead of my beautiful 895 because there's haste and mastery. Haste is even worse than agility right now, so I need that crit. Crit, if you're new to Demon Hunters and you don't know what crit does, crit allows you to refund 20 fury whenever you crit with Chaos Strike. And Chaos Strike is going to be your absolute main source of damage. You're going to have different abilities that are also going to be doing a lot of damage, but Chaos Strike is going to be absolutely at the top, and it is chaos damage. Whenever you crit, you are refunded 20 fury. So basically, for when you get a refund, you have 2 Chaos Strikes critting for 1 million or more. So that's 2 million damage instead of 1 million damage, or maybe even 500k if you don't crit, which is in this case disastrous because then you cannot have massive bursts or sustained DPS. My preferable critical strike range is around 50%. Now it shows that it is 46. That is because I'm using the Eye of Command, which allows me to stack up critical strike if I'm fighting against a single target. So, for example, bosses where there are very little ad movement, this trinket is very good. Where there is a lot of ad movement, I actually switch back to my Hunger of the Pack, which is a Halls of Valor drop. As you can see, it's 865. Simply because it had a socket and a huge amount of crit, it is still very, very viable. Because now I'm once again at 50% crit rating. Critical strike rating is your most important stat because it will allow you to burst for ridiculous amount of damage, followed by mastery, which in turn will fuel stat damage. Alright, so let's take a look at our talents that we are using in 715. These talents are basically the main core talents that you want to have for basically all legendaries out there, maybe with one or two exceptions. For example, the bracers, these ones, let's see here, the Muar Bianok Stabilizer, whatever you pronounce that one. Throw glaives deal 50% increased damage with each ricochet. So in combination with Bloodlet, so you would have your... So you can see it, you know, going over there, and obviously these are low level, but you understand the idea that when it goes over there, 50% damage on that one would be very, very nice. So for example, if you get the bracers, I would swap the Bloodlet. For me, I figured out that First Blood simply does more damage for me on most of the fights. Now, if you have a fight that has a lot of adds in them, and you're simply swapping through multiple things all the time, I would go for Bloodlet as well. For single target, I would go for First Blood. Not Bloodlet, but First Blood. I would go for this one, simply because it does such a huge amount of damage to the single target. For example, when you're doing Nithendra, first boss in Emerald Nightmare, if you're fighting against her, there's absolutely no adds there. Bloodlet cannot ricochet, so Bloodlet, First Blood will simply do a lot. These two are actually pronouncing quite difficult because there is so little difference. So excuse me if I mess up sometimes. First Blood is very powerful against single target, Bloodlet for when there is multiple adds involved. So if there is something going on with the talent, I will definitely specify that. And this was my remark on the legendaries. For example, if you get the Raiden's Cascading Eyes, the remaining cooldown on your eye beam is reduced by 0.3 seconds each time it deals a critical strike. You can go for Blind Fury, Demon Reborn, Demonic, and create a really cool build around that for when you want to clear fast, big packs of mobs and doing a huge amount of damage. So if something like that comes up, I will mention it, but we're going to go around the main core of this build, so to say, that allows you to do the most amount of damage as possible. So let's get right into it with Fellblade. The reason I didn't take Fell Mastery, because Fell Mastery is completely nerfed right now. It's completely broken because they took away our momentum on Blur. And to quickly explain to you what that was, before we could Fell Rush, then we would activate our Blur, Fell Rush once again if needed, and that way we would generate a lot of Fury as well as doing a little bit of extra damage with the increased Fell Rush damage there. That momentum has been removed from Blur. Blur is now a movement speed increase around 30-35%. Don't pin me on that one, because I can see it, unfortunately. I don't know where it is. I'm thinking my UI is blocking it or something, but I'm thinking it's around 30%, which is added to your mastery. So that is kind of cool. So if you have higher mastery, it's been added there, so you actually move pretty fast as well. So you gain something, but you also lose something. The biggest gain in this case is that you now actually have a cooldown or a damage reduction source, a personal, as people call it in raids and dungeons, that can actually save your life. Because before, we always used our one damage reduction cooldown to increase our DPS in order to build up Fury so that we could spam Chaos Strike as much as possible. So all in all, it is actually for me a pretty good change. The reason we're not taking momentum is because Fell Mastery and momentum go hand to hand together. Fell Rush and Vengeful Retreat increase your damage by 20% for 4 seconds. Since you're no longer Fell Rushing, this one is absolutely pointless. You still Fell Rush, but only when on cooldown and no longer when your Blur is off cooldown. So I'm not using them. Fellblade, on the other hand, does a huge amount of damage, as well as it actually jumps. As you can see here, this is the range from here. It actually jumps to your target and does a pretty nice amount of damage. It crits for me between 250 and even to 1,000,000 in burst phases, so it's actually pretty nice. Unfortunately, it's fire damage. I would have loved to see this chaos damage, but I'm thinking it would be through the roof then. So it's fire damage. And Demon's Blade, which is basically your auto attack build, that's what we're using right now, but we'll get to that in a second, has a chance to reset this, allowing you to use it once again. So you're auto attacking, as you can see, it reset it once again. So I would, in this situation, I would want to Fel Rush, going away, generating Fury, and Fel Blade back again, generating another 30, basically generating 55 Fury in less than a second, allowing me to use my Chaos Strike, hopefully it crits, and I can use it once again and once again, doing a huge amount of damage. Fel Blade is a very nice talent, allows for a huge amount of mobility so that you don't lose a precious second if you're into that kind of stuff when you Fel Rush away from your target. It's very, very powerful, and I really like this talent. Blind Fury is literally when you have the legendary for your eye, so we're not using this at all. Demon Blaze, as I already told you, is a auto attack build. It has been around since the Demon Hunter came out. It replaces Demon's Bite. Demon's Bite is a, as you can see here, should have passed that one. Where is it? Demon's Bite is a auto attackable. Let me put this on this bar. I was actually not planning on. As you can see here, it is able to be spammed and it generates Fury that way. If you're into that kind of stuff, I mean, it is still valuable, but no one plays it. And there is a reason for that, because Demon Blaze just does a huge amount of damage, especially in combination with Chaos Blades. And Prepared is also no longer really powerful, and Demonic Appetite is literally just for leveling. So Demon Blades is the one way to go here. It is very powerful. It does a nice amount of damage, even though it has been nerfed a bit. The damage is, it's not amazing, but it is like an extra thing that you can do when you generate Fury. So it's cool. This is the build I'm using. This is the build I've always been using. And to me, it works really, really well. In the third talent, well, let me just explain why I like Demon Blaze just a little bit deeper. Because it allows you to have a more friendly playstyle. Otherwise, you will hear this every single time. And that is you spamming Demon's Bite in order to generate your Fury, and then you have to click all your other spells. As to right now, it is a more relaxed kind of playstyle. And I personally like that, because I have a lot of momentum, I have a lot of mobility, I have a lot of things to take care of, I do a good amount of DPS, insane amount of DPS actually, but it still gives me the control of what is going on with my buttons and how it generates, so to say, so that it's more of a relaxable playstyle, unless, instead of me spamming this button, hoping that it generates enough, and then, clicking all my other abilities. If that makes any sense to you. If you want to test out Demon's Bite. No one is using it anymore. There's a good reason for that, because it, doesn't do that much amount of damage, and it is just a way more chaotic playstyle. In the third row, we have the newly revamped Chaos Cleave, which is meh. I mean, Chaos Strike hits all nearby enemies for an additional 10%. If it was any higher, I most likely would have been this, because Chaos Cleave and Chaos Strike go hand to hand together, obviously. So for any ad fight, this would have been amazing, because it literally just is a sweeping strikes or a blade flurry, whatever rogues have. It is a literally anything that is near me, I will auto attack for extra damage, or it will simply take that amount of damage. But 10% is simply too little. Even though you can crit for a huge amount of damage. Let's see here. Now this is obviously a very low target dummy, so this damage is biased. But as you can see, we critted for 9 million. That would have been 10% of that 9 million would have gone to the target that's on the right there. But on a normal run, where your Chaos Strike crits for around 4 to 500k, it's going to be 40 to 50k to all the other targets. Which is meh. Sure, you will be able to spam it and your DPS will go up, but then you come at the boss that is single target and you absolutely have nothing of Chaos Cleave. At least First Blood allows you to increase your Blade Dance with a single target, which does a lot of damage, very high amount of damage, and Blade Dance can still be used on trash, because simply the talent at that point is nullified. It simply doesn't work, because it needs to have only one target. But the moment an ad dies, you're going to be doing insane amount of damage again against a single target, boss, enemy, whatever. So First Blood in this case is very powerful, and it does a huge amount of damage. Bloodlet is in between, as already explained. If you have a fight where you have ads, I would definitely go for Bloodlet. You know, you can just use a book and then change, or be prepared, you know, and you know, go into, you know, the city and change it there. Especially in combination with Master of the Glaive. Master of the Glaive and Bloodlet are very well together. They synergize extremely well. Master of the Glaive allows you to throw your glaive 2 times. So if there are, you know, for example here, boom boom, and then over there, boom boom. So all these dummies, all these enemies are now taking a nice amount of extra damage. Especially if you have the Bracer. Bloodlet and Master of the Glaive is simply, you cannot pick First Blood anymore, because it is just too powerful. If you don't have the Bracers, I would definitely recommend First Blood on heavy single target fights with a add once in a while. If that makes any sense to you. If you have any questions, please let me know in the comments, and I will definitely try to explain that. But for me, it's First Blood. First Blood just does so much damage. In the 4th row, we have Soul Rending. Netherwalk is a very powerful pick as well. Netherwalking allows you to slip into the nether, increasing movement speed by 100% and becoming immune to damage, but unable to attack last 5 seconds, and it's on a 2-minute cooldown. This is an extra ability that you can put on your bar, so it's an extra spell that you can use. And for heavy damage phases, basically where there is a high chance of getting one-shotted, this is a very, very powerful ability. On the other hand, it doesn't render you immune to movement impairing effects. So you're simply immune to damage, and that's it. So for some fights, I take it. But for most of the time, 99% of the time, I allow my Metamorphosis to heal me for 70% of the damage I do. In terms of solo play, in terms of world PvP, in terms of soloing dungeons, ult raids, it is a very, very powerful tool, and it simply heals you tremendously. I mean, if I crit for 1 million, I heal myself for 700,000. It's very flat out simple increase healing. Desperate Instincts. It replaces Blur by a auto activating Blur, so to say, when you fall below 35%. It also increases the damage, reduces the damage taken by another additional 15%, but you can no longer use it, and you also don't have the increased movement speed anymore, which in some of the times can be very, very useful. So we're not also taking that one. Then we come to the 4th row, and here things get interesting, because this really is up to you what you like. And it really is heavy flavored by what you're going to do. Momentum, as already said, hangs very close to Fel Mastery. We're not using that. Fel Rush and Vengeful Retreat increase your damage on by 20% for 4 seconds. But it's 4 seconds, 20%. It is simply too little for the amount of hassle that you have to go through in order to activate it. You will still be jumping all over the map in order to keep your 20% damage up. What used to be like the high skill cap of getting your momentum build going is completely nullified now by the most OP talent in the entire game called Nemesis. Increase the damage you inflict against a target by 25% for 1 minute. This is a flat out 25% damage increase that is scaled with absolutely everything you do. It doesn't matter if it's chaos damage, it doesn't matter if it's fire damage, it doesn't matter if it's physical damage. Everything is increased by 25%. And the beautiful thing is it stacks with all your other damage increasing abilities. There is no diminishing returns. That is why this talent is absolutely godlike, and I would always recommend it in almost everything you do. However, there is a very, very fun talent called Fel Eruption, and I just want to show you what it does. Boop. It does 16.5 million damage non-crit. Now, this talent is very, very fun if you want to do things solo. For example, you want to go into an old raid like Firelands or Black Temple, or doesn't matter, even Mist of Pandaria raids, it crits for a absolute truck. However, there's one catch. It only works against all bosses. That's a good thing. It only works against bosses and special elite mobs that cannot be stunned. If a mob can be stunned, it will simply stun it and does chaos damage increased by your mastery and stun it for 2 seconds, and that's it. However, against a boss, it will do chaos damage amplified by your mastery, amplified by your chaos blades, which we'll get in a second, and it will absolutely hit for 3.5 to 4 million. I've seen it hit for me for 3.8 million. People that have a little bit more mastery most likely will hit a lot more. It is on a 30-second cooldown. It can be amazing for low-level dungeons, low-level mythics, because you literally take a chunk from the boss's HP. It is absolutely ridiculous. When I go into ult raids, I use this, and PvP is pretty powerful too, because it is a stun, 2 seconds, which can be very helpful. But if you want to go for the most amount of damage, I recommend Nemesis, because it has the 25% damage increase. Also, what is good about this talent, if the target dies, so for example, I put it on a random mob, let's say I put it on this unfortunate deer over here. There, it is now a Nemesis, if that is a thing, and I'm gonna murder it. I now have damage against beasts increased by 25%. So even if the target dies, the buff gets removed from the target and it is placed over to me so that I still have the buff damage. So anything that is a beast, anything that is a demon, anything that is a humanoid, plant, rock, I don't know, elemental, whatever that is out there, you will still get the 25% damage increase. So it can even be used on alt or on add heavy fights. It's a very powerful talent. Then we are on the 6th row, and that is basically whatever shall I pick? Okay. Master of the Glaive is unfortunately the most powerful one in this case, simply because it allows your throw glaive to have 2 additional charges, and it also snares the enemies. It is a good talent on its own, but I would have preferred to have something else in this line, because Demon Reborn is absolutely useless for us. Unleashed Power is... I still have not found a use for this till this day. I'm not kidding you. I have never, ever found a use for this. The only use I can think of, and this is extremely rare, is that when you have a raid or a dungeon or whatever, and you have a very important ad that needs to be stunned, even if it's just like an interrupt, and you have no one else inside the group that can stun, this would be, preferable, because then you can do the stun, you can do it whenever you want, because it doesn't cost any fury, and the cooldown is reduced by 33 seconds, putting it on a 45 to 40 second cooldown. Only then you would have a use for this. For the rest, never ever. Maybe PvP, but I don't PvP, so I literally don't care about PvP. So Throw Glaive in this case, of Master of the Glaive in this case, is the most desirable one, because even if you don't have the Bloodlet talent, you can still boop 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 and boop boop, increase your damage against heavy specific ads by a little bit. It's always nice. And then on the last row you have your Chaos Blades, which is in my honest opinion, also one of the most overpowered talents in the game right now. Because your Chaos... Oh, that's the wrong button. Your Chaos Blades stacks with your Mastery. So if we take a look at this, Mastery, 37%. Increase all damage done by 37%. So if we were to take a heavier Mastery item, just to make a good comparison, our Mastery is now 39%, or 38%, and our Chaos damage, or Chaos Blades, is also 38%. So what that means is, Chaos Blades takes a look at your Mastery, takes the Chaos damage increase from that Mastery, and puts it in a 2-minute cooldown talent that increases all the damage by said Mastery. So what you see on the screen right now, that is 25 from Nemesis, plus your original Mastery from your own, that's plus 37, plus your Chaos Blades, that's another 37%, and if you're lucky to have the Symbiote Belt, it's another 30% above 90% health. So that is a lot of extra damage that you can do against the boss every 2 minutes. Obviously this one doesn't apply, it is only for the first 10% of the boss. But this one, and this one, they all stack, and it allows you to do a ridiculous amount of damage. Also Chaos Blades, your auto attack deals 200% increased damage and causes chaos damage. So now your normally hitting shadow damage Demon Blades now suddenly become chaos damage, so your auto attacks also are empowered with chaos damage, which are increased by all your mastery. That is why this is so ridiculously powerful. Demonic, I-Beam causes you to enter demon form for 8 seconds after finishes dealing damage. It's nice, but once again you need a legendary, which I unfortunately don't have. And Fel Barrage. Fel Barrage has been buffed. It is pretty okay. But as I already explained, Chaos Blades is simply too overpowered that you cannot ignore it. That's simply how it is. You cannot ignore it because it is so powerful. Fel Barrage simply cannot win from that. Alright, and welcome to the very final part of this guide, the rotation. You might be wondering where I am. I am in Neltharion's Lair. This is the first boss on Mythic. I tried numerous amounts in Heroic Dungeons, in other Mythics, in looking for raids. I tried all kinds of stuff. There's actually a clip of me showing right now that I pulled aggro from the tanks on Xavier's in looking for raid. Just to show you, how much damage I was doing. Then again, most likely the tanks were AFK, browsing porn, jacking off, browsing 4chan, whatever, so that's not really a huge feat. But I was getting annoyed, they pull without pull timers, so my pods, are messed up. So at least this time, I know what I will, this time I'm on my own and I can really show you what to do. It's more relaxed that way. So, we're gonna break it down. What do you need? First off, you need this macro. Hashtag show tooltip. If you don't know what this does, the tooltip actually shows the tool tip of the skill you're going to be using. There's no rocket science there. In this case, it's Chaos Blades. As you can see, Chaos Blades is that one. If I were to revert this with Nemesis, it would show the Nemesis symbol over here, and that's it. Now, actually, I was thinking use the Potion of Prolonged Power in here, but that might actually not help because I need to generate some Fury extra, so I'm going to be removing that, and you have to click it manually so that you can pre-pot, and then during the fight you can do it as well. You can pot 2 times in a fight. Some people might not like that. It is like a little bit more of a hassle, but it gives you a little bit more control of your Fury, and when you can actually start, pumping out damage, because the more Fury you have, the more damage you will be doing. Because that makes sense, obviously. If you go in without Fury and you pop all your cooldowns and for the next 5 seconds you're not doing anything because you don't crit, good job, you literally wasted 5 seconds of your major burst. So we're gonna jump in, we're gonna Fel Rush in, we're gonna throw a glaive so that we have that damage ticking. Then we're gonna build up some Fury, most likely with Fel Blade and another Fel Rush. Then we're gonna pop our Metamorphosis, pop our macro, and that's when we start doing, and that's when we're gonna pump damage. So we're going to be going in. I'm going to pop my potion. I'm going to pop my... I don't need my drums right now. So I'm going in. Fel Rush first. Fel Blade. Then this one. So we have a little bit of Fury right now. Okay, here we go. Now we pop all cooldowns. As you can see, I am now spamming my Chaos Strike over and over because I was able to spam it. Now I'm spamming Fel Blade, back to Chaos Strike, back to Fel Blade, back to Chaos Strike. This one is off cooldown. Use it once. Back to him. Now we're using a Fel Rush so that it generates Fury. Back to that one. This one. It's very difficult to explain in all honesty when you're playing. But as you can see, the damage I'm doing is absolutely ridiculous. You're literally not using anything else on this bar except these 3 things. And basically whenever they are in order, you can use them. That's basically how it works. It's that simple. I'm actually not sure if I can actually kill him. But maybe I am actually getting really lucky with crits. I should not stand in this stuff. Maybe a second potion. If I take this thing, I might actually survive. And the reason I'm using that one, that was actually intended. Never, ever, 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 ever use I-Beam on a single target. Ever. It is a complete waste of your DPS. Never, ever use that one. Yeah, there we go. I was able to do it. Alright guys, that was it for this little video. Well, little. There's actually quite a big chunk of information there. I hope that you enjoyed it. I hope that you learned something from it. I took quite some time into this one, so I would be able to make it as detailed and thorough as possible. That was definitely my intention. If you have any questions about the stats, distribution, the priorities, if you have any questions about the rotation, if you have any questions about legendaries, please feel free to ask them in the comments in a civil and polite way, because that will definitely help me respond to you, because that makes sense, I think. Anyway, I really enjoyed making this. I spent, well, a day and a ridiculous amount of extra hours in making it, as good as possible. There's nothing flashy going on, you know, but I just wanted to make it, you know, clear. If it was too much for some, you know, too boring maybe, I'm sorry about that, but I wanted to make it as detailed and, well, thorough as possible. So yeah, I hope that this helped you. I hope that you will be able to increase your DPS. I hope that you give Demon Hunter a try. And I will see you in the next video, whatever that is going to be. And as always, keep on winning, boys. Keep on winning. Let's do a little wave here. Bye.